Audio Jungle.
So Miami Dolphins, 2023 season, 11-6, 7-2 at home, 4-4 away. Before I get your input on this, I want to throw something at you and have you react to it. If I want to first say their 2023 record is impressive, but not as good when you dive deep into it. I say that because they have their offense is inflated by against bad teams.
Correct.
Every single game that they played against playoff teams, this is how many points they scored. Week 4 versus the Bills, 20 points. Week 7 versus the Eagles, 17 points. Week 9 versus the Chiefs, 14 points. Versus the Cowboys, week 16, 22. Week 17 versus the Ravens, they scored 19 points and got shit stomped by the Ravens. They put up 56. And then week 18 against the Bills, they put up 14 points. Playoffs game versus the Chiefs at Arrowhead, they put up 7 points. Against real competition, not only does this offense just completely fold, they struggled to even put up 20 points. So I think that their offensive numbers are incredibly inflated by them playing bad teams and executing against those bad teams.
Yeah, they're like the best of like the mid-level teams is what it seems like, because I have those same stats written down. Basically, they were 10-1 versus non-playoff teams and 1-5 versus playoff teams last year.
Yuck.
So, yeah, going 1-5 against playoff teams is not great, especially when you have to face 10 teams who are over 500 coming into this season as well. So normally if you're over 500, you make the playoffs majority of the time. So that's just like a little highlight into their upcoming schedule, but they definitely struggle against good teams.
I also think that their division is just, I mean, the Bills are still going to be the Bills.
Yeah. Jets are infinitely better.
The Jets are way better. And then I know that the Patriots on paper aren't great, but for some reason, every single season, it seems like the
Every
Patriots
time.
beat one of these teams. Like somehow they beat the Bills
It's like
last year.
down to the wire, or it's like a one possession game with like a minute 15, and the opposing team needs to have like a 60-yard drive to go down and win.
Yeah, no, I'm right with you, but it seems like with their division getting better, and we'll get into it, but I think them getting worse, I think that'll play a role into this upcoming season. Another thing that we have to knock off right away is we got to talk about the Tua contract the same way we talked about the Jordan Love contract. $53 million per year, really a 3-year, $152 million deal they can get out after 3 years after the 2026 season. Although he led the league in passing yards last season, I still feel like after what happened last year and what happened the year before that with all the concussions and then how he performed in that playoff game against the Chiefs, I feel like Tua just has a lot to prove still, and I feel like that this deal was jumping the gun a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think he has a lot to prove. Maybe not a lot, but he definitely has something to prove. I mean, he can clearly go out there and beat the teams that he's supposed to beat. But if you want to be considered like an elite quarterback in the NFL, you have to start winning games against teams that are playoff teams, teams that might be better than you, etc. Um, from what I was hearing, I heard that this deal was like much better for the Miami Dolphins because it gave them like some type of opportunity to get out of it. And I think he has to like there's some clause or something that's in this contract where he has to play a X amount of games or something like that. I could be completely wrong. I could have swore
Probably.
this is who I was
Probably. I
who
have no idea though.
but yeah, I
I
think it's a
still feel
better
like
deal for the Dolphins.
I know that it's like the going rate for quarterback to have like a young talented quarterback at this point, but I feel like that Tua probably shouldn't have reset the market, but I don't know. That's just what I think. But like I said, I think they can get out of it after 3 years, so we will see how this season plays out.
I mean, this kind of goes back to like the Dallas Cowboys issue with like Dak Prescott of Tua's been good and in the regular season, like they've won enough like they've won games, made it to the playoffs, and then they just don't get it done in the playoffs. Like, at what point do you say, "Hey, we don't want to give you this money"? Because I feel like that's kind of what the Cowboys are dealing with right now.
Yeah,
Like,
and
you have to. Does it have
you
to
see what
be X amount, like 7 years?
I mean,
Like,
you see what the
when do you draw
Cowboys
the
are doing. I
line?
feel like the line should have already been drawn. I feel like you know what you we literally watched Tua go into Kansas City last season in the playoffs in a must-win game and lay an egg. There's really not much
Yeah,
more to it than that. Like, he legitimately laid an egg. He looked terrible. If it wasn't
yeah,
for Tyreek Hill busting one long play out of his ass, that entire game would have been awful for them. Um, I I don't know. I think the difference is, and we talk about it all the time. Remember when Kirk Cousins was getting like franchise tagged every single year and he was getting pissed off about it? Like,
yeah.
why aren't teams utilizing this franchise tag like on the quarterback ever? Why are the quarterbacks always the ones who have the most power? Because I don't know how many teams around the league would be willing to pay. I don't think Dolphins fans can talk themselves into Tua. I really don't. Um,
Yeah, I agree with you there. But also, like, what's the alternative here
The
for
alternative is
Miami?
the alternative is to play your cards right, and instead of giving him 3 years, franchise tag him, and I don't know what the franchise tag looks like for a quarterback. It's like probably
Yeah,
30 plus $1 million if you franchise tag
probably.
him, whatever it is, and just let him play on the franchise tag and play it from a year-to-year basis, and if he's able to prove himself, then give him a long-term contract. I don't understand why every single NFL team is backing themselves into a corner with these quarterbacks. I think probably the best example as of late of a team backing themselves into a corner with a quarterback is Daniel Jones. And
Yeah.
I'm not comparing Tua to Daniel Jones because I think Tua is infinitely better, but I don't know. I feel like that this could be a Daniel Jones esque situation because ultimately, if this year doesn't go the way that they think it's going to go, and I think me and you might see eye to eye on that, they're going to have to look around and say, okay, we don't have a lot of key positions. Is it really necessary for Tyreek Hill to be the highest paid player on our team, second highest paid player on our team, taking up 15% of our cap when we should probably get rid of him and put these resources to other places because we can't even win a playoff game?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm looking at their positional spending, and um, their two highest paid positions are wide receiver and corner. Where wide receiver they have 52 million locked up per year, and corner at 44 locked up per year, which that's
Seems
insane.
unnecessary. Seems very unnecessary. I think you had to do the Tyreek Hill deal, even though he came out and said that he wanted to play for his team and he wasn't worried about it, blah, blah, blah. Like, ultimately, we know Drew Rosenhaus and we know that he's going to get that big contract done for Tyreek. Um,
You also see
ultimate,
all these other wide receivers getting deals, and that's probably what triggered it, if I had to guess.
no, definitely. But ultimately, Tyreek's 31 years old. If he plays 3 more years, he will be 34 years old. If he plays out the entirety of his deal. And unless if something unless if he just has incredible longevity, which I am definitely open to thinking Tyreek Hill can play a long time. But
Mhm.
unless if that happens, it usually we talked about it with Tay Adams. Usually when you start reaching this age, there is a fall off in your game. I think Tyreek Hill's a little different than Tay Adams. I think that he has intangibles that he doesn't, such as his speed. Um, but I think that it wouldn't shock me that in 2 years, Tyreek Hill wasn't, like, the same exact guy as he was last season.
Right. Yeah, and even if he's not that same exact guy, like, there was a point where he was on pace for what, 2,000 yards?
Yeah.
So, like, you get Tyreek Hill at 1,500 yards as a wide receiver. If you get him at 1,400, maybe not necessarily at that price, but, like, that's still a great season.
It's a great season, but you're paying him to be that dude.
Correct. Yeah.
So ultimately to round out the Tua contract, talks is, um, we will see. I do think that he has a lot to prove. I think that the way that the playoff game rounded out last season when they should have at least had that game competitive. They didn't stand a chance.
No.
And
I have a
the
question for you about the tag after you're done. Sorry, go ahead.
and then having their um having their offense being like their good grace, like that's what everybody knows them for, and for them to go out and put up 7 points, it's just a bad. It's and Tua to just look bad the entire. It looked like he was too cold to play football. Like it looked like he didn't want to be there. I just thought it was a really bad look for him, and it's something that he needs to shake off and win a playoff. You need to go and win a playoff game this season. That's the expectation.
Yeah. It was definitely too cold to play football for the record.
It was
But the Chiefs were out there playing, so you got to show up too.
for sure.
Um, my question to you about the tag, the franchise tag for quarterbacks is, can they just like give it to Tua every single year and then he doesn't even have the opportunity to look elsewhere to get a contract? Or like,
No,
because
I mean,
wouldn't he just get to a certain point where the Dolphins just tag him and then he has a really good year and then they're like, oh well, we want to see you do it again, and then
I
he's
think
like,
you
well, I
can.
just proved that I can stay healthy and I proved that we could have another 10 plus win season. I want to go somewhere that's going to give me a long term deal.
Hold
Because
on.
that I like if that was the situation, why wouldn't that just happen? But I mean,
Because,
you do have to like other teams would have to be willing to give to a long term deal, which
let me look something up because um you can franchise tag a player a maximum of 3 times in their career. Yep,
right.
for a
Okay.
team. Um, Ultimately, he doesn't have to sign the tag and he doesn't have to play. But I always use this example. Somebody said to me like, "Oh, CD Lamb's not going to report." I'm like, ultimately, I know CD Lamb wants to get paid. He probably will get paid, but you're going to tell me that CD Lamb just came off of the best season of his entire career, and he's going to lose a year of his prime because he doesn't want to play on the contract that he's going to. We watched what happened with Le'Veon Bell, and it was probably the most idiotic decision that was ever made by a player. And
It was detrimental to the rest of his career.
I think when it really comes down to it is like I don't think a lot of guys are willing to miss out on a full year of income, and I don't think a lot of guys are willing to sit out a full season in their prime. And I guess what would be done in this scenario is think about when Lamar got tagged, for example. They gave
Mhm.
him a non-exclusive franchise tag and said, "Go test the market, see what you can get, and if somebody's willing to pay you or trade for you or whatever, go and do it." I would do the same thing with Tyreek Hill. I mean with Tua.
Tua.
Go to it. Here's a non-exclusive franchise tag and go figure out your value because it is not what you think it is. And I don't think I think that the way that everybody talks about how Brock Purdy is extremely successful because he has Kyle Shanahan, that's the only reason that Tua is successful is because he has somebody like Mike McDonald. He has an excellent receiver like Tyreek Hill and all these speedsters around him. So I think it's very situational for him. And I don't think that there's a lot of teams around the NFL who would be like foaming at the mouth to give him a big contract. So yes, I think utilizing a franchise tag in this situation or a non-exclusive franchise tag in this situation, allowing him to test out his value, I think that that could be a way to go about the situation, but they didn't do it that way.
Right.
It could
Okay.
be that's like it, I play a shit ton of GM mode on Madden, like that's what I would do.
Okay. All right. Well,
That's what
that
I would do.
honestly that helps because I wasn't like in my head. I'm like, why? It's a little different for running backs because running backs don't necessarily like. It doesn't feel like a running back realistically gets more than like a 2 year deal ever at a time. Um, but obviously with quarterbacks, teams look to extend them for like more than 3 plus years is what it's been seeing. Obviously is what's been happening. So I was just curious. Like, I agree with you. I don't think there'd be a team eager to give to a some crazy 4 year,
Mm-mm. No.
$180 million deal by any means. Um,
And I really
but
mean that. I don't think Dolphins fans think that either. I know a few Dolphins fans that like don't love Tua. Like they're not high on Tua.
I mean,
So
we just read off the stats. Like he's great against bad teams, but the second it gets cold and the second they play a good team, it seems like this offense just freezes over.
Yeah, and you have to play
No
in,
pun
like, New
intended.
and you have to play in New England, Buffalo, and New York in the dead of winter in your division, so, I mean, that's not
Yeah.
getting any warmer anytime soon. Um,
No.
the next thing I wanna transfer into over here before we get into additions and losses and all this shit is I'm extremely worried about this defense. The losses on this defense were Shaq Barrett retired, that was their claim to fame of who was going to help them out. Shaq Barrett retired, Christian Wilkins left, Xavier Howard got cut, Andrew Van Ginkel left, Emmanuel Ogbah, uh, left. You have Bradley Chubb off of an ACL injury, who's probably gonna miss the first half of the season. You got Jalen Phillips off of an Achilles injury, who's gonna be back probably halfway through the season. And then you have Cam Goad, who has a knee injury, who's gonna miss the start of the season, I believe. So don't freak out if I get that wrong because everybody's fucking annoying in the comments. Um, but ultimately, like your two best edge rushers, Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, off an ACL and an Achilles, coming back midway through the season after getting hurt halfway through the season. I don't love the timeline on that, and I'm not going to sure that like I think that they can go be back to play, but are they going to be back to the elite level that or the level that they were playing at beforehand? I would probably argue otherwise. And then the guys
At
who they
least not
brought,
right away. At
no,
least not right away.
and then the guys that they brought in as well, Calais Campbell, he's legitimately 40 years old. Jordan Poyer's old. And then they brought in Kendall Fuller. Kendall Fuller's my dog, Virginia Tech for life, but I just don't think he's the same player. And on top of all of this, you got a new DC. And I feel like the injuries that they have in key positions on this defense and the guys that they brought in, I'm not loving that. And on top of having a new DC, I feel like this defense is sus, plain and simple.
Yeah, I think this defense is in a very much so prove it situation. Prove that you can go out there and stop teams. Otherwise, it might get ugly. So, I
I
mean,
think this might be one of the worst defenses in the league.
they still have Jalen Ramsey, which obviously he's phenomenal, and it's not like Kendall Fuller needs to come in there and be or cornerback number one. So, like, I'm okay with those things, but your two edge rushers both coming off injuries. You're starting a 45-year-old defensive tackle that's been in the league for how long? That should be a rotational guy. I know he just came off like a good season, but how like that still feels like a guy that should be in a rotation and not your starting D tackle. You lost what Andrew Van Ginkel was like one of their best players. Christian Wilkin was one of their best players. Like those are two holes that are going to be tough to fill.
Yeah, I
Pause.
completely agree with you. Um, and then we talked about the losses that they had on the team. On top of that, you lose Robert Hunt. I think that this O line hasn't gotten any better. Um, I think that what's their left tackle's name that's literally hurt
Ter-
every single season?
Teron
Yeah,
Armstead.
Teron Armstead. I'm not thrilled on him. Like he's hurt every single year, and I think that he's already hurt going into this season. Um, so for a team whose quarterback had, and this is on a serious note, like legitimate like concussion concern where we watched him like it was actually concerning and he considered retirement after that season. I don't love that you're not beefing up this O line. I personally think that that's a little concerning.
I mean, I don't know what money they realistically have to put into this O line. Like I'm looking at the guys that they added in free agency, and the most money that they spent on a per year deal is 8,800,000. So like, yeah, maybe you can get somebody like I don't know, maybe somebody around that number that's going to be decent, but they didn't bring in any other offensive linemen besides through the draft, and they drafted one guy.
I
So
agree. I
that's
agree. Yeah.
it's kind of concerning,
And
especially
then
when you're all like you have to. You can't if you have like all these if you have good weapons on offense and your defense is what it is at this point. You've so many guys coming off injuries. Honestly, just bank on like going all in on offense and hoping that the two guys that are coming off injuries are going to come back to somewhat normal form. hope that Calais Campbell can somehow replicate the season he had last year. Maybe Jordan Poyer can give you a throwback season, and maybe that defense is okay, but at least commit more to your offensive line and try to be that team that scores 60 points a game, I guess. I mean,
I guess my pushback on you like already is less like I know this offense is good. We went over numbers when they actually played against good opponents where they can barely put up 20. And then on top of it, they're so top heavy. Like, and they're all these
yeah.
guys at this point, like Tua's injury has injury history. Waddle was banged up all season last year, in and out of the lineup. Reek got hurt last season, and he's 31 years old. Achan was in and out of the lineup all season last year. The fact that Raheem Mostert had a full season on his knee is like a grace from God. I doubt that we see that again this season. And then you sign OBJ, who's already on the PUP list. Like, I think that just
Yeah.
offense is like, I get it. You have Mike McDaniel. He's a mastermind. He's a dog. But if one of these top guys go down, I think that this offense starts looking extremely ordinary quick because you're going to have Braxton Berrios and River Craycraft flying around out there, and those are not the guys that you want starting at wide receiver.
Have you seen anything about Malik Washington in camp yet?
I haven't. I have not seen any, and he was somebody that
Okay.
I liked, but no, I have not seen anything about him in camp. And based on what we see from what they did this offseason, their three guys are probably Reek, Waddle, and OBJ,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's what I was.
Johnu Smith at tight end.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna. I was wondering because, like you said, you liked him. I liked him out of Virginia, and then they go ahead and sign OBJ, but so that pretty much just like cuts off a shot for that kid to really like play. So
At least year one.
yeah, at least year one. But I mean, putting him in at wide receiver 3 is probably like the best case scenario for him in an offense with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as the two guys in front of you.
Why would you sign OBJ? The OBJ signing,
I don't
first off,
know.
OBJ has not been
I don't
good
know.
in maybe 6 years. I've no I
He was
when's
good
the
for the Rams up until he tore his ACL.
dude, he was decent for the Rams. Like I want to see the last time Odell had 1,000 yards like in a season. Honestly, I'm about to look. The last time OBJ had 1,000 yards in a
2019.
season was 2019 when he
Yep.
played for Cleveland,
That's what I
and
was gonna say.
like since then, 319 yards, 500, 200, 300. Like didn't play because he missed a season and then he had 500 yards last year. He's extremely pedestrian. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to take a shot on a guy that you just drafted to see. I think that if you put a rookie out there, I think that he can put up 500 yards. I really do.
Yeah,
So I don't
I do
get
too.
why I
In
don't
this
understand
offense, for sure.
I don't understand why signing a veteran who's a non-impact player when you could have an opportunity to develop younger guys who they're going to need moving forward. I feel like it's a loss, and I think that OBJ signing is one of the most confusing of the offseason. I don't know why anybody would want him on his team on their team.
It is only $3 million, but that $3 million could have been
Doesn't
spent
matter.
elsewhere.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't matter. I don't save the 3 mil. I think paying OBJ is a complete waste of money.
I've one other thing here. I'm
Go
looking
ahead.
at the positional spending again, and for the offensive line, they're ranked 24th in the NFL with
It's rough.
35.87 million.
Do
Same
you
with
want
their D
to?
line's 24th as well. It's bad.
Do you want to? We already went into the losses. Do you want to go over who they added? I know they added Jordan Brooks, and who else did they go with?
Yeah, I've got Jordan Brooks, Kendall Fuller, Aaron Brewer, Shaq Barrett, Jonnu Smith, Odell, Jordan Poyer, Ciaran Neal.
Well, Shaq Barrett retired. The
So
one
yeah,
the one guy I
those
really
are
like
yeah.
that they one guy really who I like that who they picked up is Jonnu Smith. I think he's actually going to be a dog for this team, low key fantasy sleeper. But yeah,
He had a good yeah,
I
he had a
really
good
like
season.
him in this offense like a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
It always
so
felt like this team like what never really had like that good of a tight end, and it felt like if they had just like somebody that could go out there that they would be a little bit better on offense too. Even though they've been
Are
good.
you really gonna talk shit on Gesicki
I
right
knew
now?
you were gonna say that.
I mean,
I
that's
knew
my
you were gonna
guy.
say that. I know.
That's fucked up.
Sorry, Mike. Sorry, Mike.
Um, so
It
my
wasn't your
first
fault.
question.
They didn't throw you the ball.
That's so true. My first question for you is what is this team's weakness? I feel like that we addressed it, but reiterated, or what do you have
Yeah,
in else do you have in mind?
I mean, I think it's going to come down to the defensive line. Two guys coming off of season-ending injuries, a 40-year-old D tackle starting on that defensive line isn't good. I did see a couple things about Chop in training camp.
Oh, we forgot to talk
Uh,
about that was an addition to the roster as well, Chop Robinson.
You're right. But I don't know how much of an impact he's going to make like immediately at the start of the season. He'll probably end up just rotating in to start, but I think that that's probably like a good decision that they actually made is taking a defensive lineman, especially with two guys coming off season-ending surgery. It's like that. So I'll give them credit for that at least. Um, but yeah, I think the defensive line is going to be. It could get ugly.
I'm not as high on Chop as you are, but if he turns out to be good, I know he's an athletic freak. My main concern with him is all of his sacks in college came against UMass, and I think if me and you lined up at edge against UMass,
Fair,
that we might be able to legitimately get a sack.
fair. My point being was like they recognized they had a weakness on defensive line and they took a defensive lineman is
I
more so
gotcha.
what I was getting at there.
And then on the other side of things, what makes this team special? I mean, they have Tyreek Hill. He's the best player. He's voted by the players in the NFL as legitimately the number one best player in the NFL. I don't think anybody can stop him. He's a dog. He's one of my favorite players ever. Um, yeah, I
And
mean, what
he's
else is
in
there to
like
say?
one of the best schemed up offenses, I mean, of the last 10 years, probably.
Yeah, I mean, he left Mahomes and puts up better stats because of how special he is. Like, he's just a
Yeah.
dog, and if you don't like Tyreek Hill, you're a weirdo. He's like the coolest player in the NFL. He plays Fortnite. He is a clown. He has 175 kids, and
I was just going to say,
he's an
yeah.
absolute animal. Like, what's there not to like about him? So
Yeah.
yeah, what makes him special? You have the best player in the I mean, I guess it's subjective, but I mean, he was voted like the best player in the NFL by his peers, so good for him.
That's right.
Um 2024 prediction. My prediction right now, I don't have like a win-loss or anything like that, but I will ultimately say that I will be picking the Dolphins to absolutely miss the playoffs. I don't see how this team is a playoff team.
Yeah. I already bet them to miss the playoffs as well. I've got them going 7-10.
Oh wow. And then
Listen to this
lastly, go
listen to
ahead.
this stretch of games that they have to finish the season when it's cold and they play their worst football in the cold. They go Thursday, November 28th at Green Bay, Sunday, December 8th versus the Jets, Sunday, December 15th at Houston, Sunday, December 22nd versus the Niners, Sunday, December 29th at Cleveland, and Sunday, January 5th at the Jets.
Yikes.
Yeah. So to end your season, you've got the Jets twice at Green Bay, San Francisco, Texans. Tough.
Yikes. That's a tough round out of the schedule. So also on top of my 2024 prediction, I think that they trade Tyreek Hill in 2024. I don't see how the money
Ooh.
matches up. I don't see how they can have him in their long-term plans, especially when they're not making the playoffs. And I feel like that when you look at this entire roster, two is not going anywhere. They just signed him to a 3-year deal. Also, he's not going to have that sort of trade value that Tyreek Hill's going to get. I think that you see Tyreek Hill move on to another team in 2024. So those are my two predictions for the 2024 season for the Dolphins.
I'm kind of trying to like think about other teams, like other offenses that um Tua could fit into. And it's basically just me putting him in offenses with like
Shanahan.
other insanely great head coaches. Yeah. Like the two teams that came to mind were the Rams and the Niners.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
So
no shit. Any quarter respectfully,
yeah,
Baker Mayfield won a game on a short
yeah,
week after being there for legitimately a day and led a game-winning drive. Like, I don't I think that any quarterback could be successful in some way with those guys as a at the helm. They're different.
yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying. And if you're like a
Bro,
fringe guy like that, what?
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, if you're like a fringe guy like that, then it's really tough to see you in other offenses outside of like ones that are with the smartest offensive minds in the NFL. Although I don't think he would. I think it would be weird if he was on the Chiefs, but
Yeah, no
that's like
shit.
that's not me taking anything away from Andy Reid. I think Andy Reid's a great coach, but it it seems different. It seems significantly different to me.
Yeah, I mean,
So
Mahomes is the GOAT.
I mean, if
Not the
Mahomes was
GOAT,
not
but
even in
best
the
player in the
NFL,
NFL. Yeah. All right, well, I hope that the Dolphins fans see this and catch wind. I really wanna see what they think about Tua,
yeah, I
ultimately.
do. I do too. I don't
I
really
wanna
know
see
too
how
many
they
Dolphins fans either, but
I don't. I
if
wanna
if you're
see I know a few. I know, like, 3, but, like, that's it, and they're my boys, so, like, it's different. I wanna hear people who are outside of the situation, don't know me, and I wanna hear specifically what they think about Tua, like, as their QB, because the other stuff with the roster, it is what it is, but, like, Tua is your quarterback now, like, long term, at least for the next 3
yeah,
years.
yeah, moving forward, so you're stuck with him.
Yeah. Alright, brother.
Audio Jungle.